Hello and welcome everyone to today's Thought Leaders series, Returned Peace Corps Volunteers Advancing Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. My name is Darlene Grant, and I am Senior Advisor to the Director at the Peace Corps and your host for today's event. My path to the Peace Corps began after 10 years of clinical social work practice and 18 years as professor of social work at the University of Texas at Austin. In 2009, I took a leave of absence to serve as a Peace Corps volunteer in Cambodia, and then served as a country director for Peace Corps in Mongolia and Kosovo. I am so honored to be here today with you and with our panel of 3 returned Peace Corps volunteers who are working to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion across multiple fields. After hearing from our panelists, Peace Corps Deputy Chief of Staff, Jackie Deneen, will give a brief overview of the Peace Corps' own intercultural competency, diversity, equity, and inclusion work. But first, a few housekeeping notes before we begin. We have a very packed discussion, and so we'll not have time for audience questions today. Therefore, the chat function is not enabled. Once the formal program is complete, we will open the chat for any comments that you would like to share with our panelists and other attendees. We are recording this event and will make it available. Finally, closed captioning is accessible via the link that you should be seeing in the chat right now. And the American Sign Language interpreter should remain visible on the screen throughout the program. Now, it is my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce Acting Peace Corps Director, Carol Spahn. Carol brings more than 25 years of public and private sector experience to her current role as Acting Peace Corps Director, and has worked in countries around the world on issues ranging from small business development to infectious disease prevention and women's empowerment. Most recently, Carol served as the Peace Corps Chief of Operations in the Africa region, covering Eastern and Southern Africa. Previously, she served a 5-year term as Country Director of Peace Corps Malawi, and she is an RPCV from Romania, 1994 to 1996. Please join me in welcoming Acting Director Carol Spahn.
Thank you, Dr. Grant, and a very warm welcome to everyone who's joining us today. Peace Corps has been hosting these thought leader forums as part of our 60th anniversary celebration. And it's just a terrific opportunity to highlight returned volunteers who have become thought leaders in various fields. And we take the opportunity to explore how their Peace Corps service influenced their career choices and how the knowledge, skills, and perspectives they gained have helped them make a meaningful impact in their careers, in their communities, and in the world. We've seen that once a Peace Corps volunteer, always a Peace Corps volunteer. What's learned in service becomes a lifetime of service, and we are just thrilled to welcome today's panel of 3 very distinguished returned volunteers who are doing critical work in advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I want to pause for a minute on those words: diversity, equity, inclusion. There is so much packed into those 3 words, so much history, so many individual experiences, and so much meaning. It's very important that we don't use those words lightly. Today's panelists are making a difference by taking those 3 weighty words and turning them into action. I look forward to learning from them and hearing about their unique journeys from Peace Corps service to the positions they hold today. But before we jump into that discussion, I want to extend a special welcome to the ambassadors and representatives from the embassies of Ecuador, Peru, and Togo, the countries where our panel is served. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for our long partnership in advancing world peace and friendship. It is a huge honor to have you and your staff in attendance for today's event. I understand that we also have leadership from the National Peace Corps Association and members of the Friends of Ecuador, Friends of Peru, and Friends of Togo groups also here. These Friends of groups stay connected and engaged with their countries of service decades after they complete their service overseas. So thank you for your service and for your lifelong commitment. I also want to thank our return volunteer community, including the National Peace Corps Association, for their very thoughtful feedback and recommendations to the agency on the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Over the past year, we've received numerous letters and reports, both from within and from outside the agency. We've held listening sessions, we participated in panel discussions, and we are digging deep as a leadership team to determine what actions we can take now, as well as to be intentional about how we weave DEI into our 4-year strategic plan to ensure that the structural work that needs to be done is done, that accountability mechanisms are in place, and that we achieve real systemic change. At the end of today's session, you'll hear about some of the steps we've already taken, the foundation that we're building on, and the way forward. I'm also keenly aware of our need to share our progress on a more regular basis with the many stakeholders who care very deeply about the Peace Corps and the way we work to achieve our mission. You will hear a few updates today, but I also invite you to follow us on social media and to subscribe to our Inside Peace Corps newsletter, where we'll be sharing a wide range of announcements and updates. I would be remiss if I didn't also mention that immediately following this forum, we are very excited to be swearing in our first group of volunteers following the global evacuation last year. In partnership with FEMA, we're welcoming back 158 evacuated volunteers who served in 52 countries with Peace Corps and who speak over 80 languages. They'll be putting their cross-cultural skills to work in 5 states here in the United States to help reach underserved populations and support COVID vaccination efforts. This is only the 2nd time in Peace Corps history that volunteers have deployed in the United States, and we couldn't be more proud to welcome them back. So with that, let me turn it back over to you, Dr. Grant, and I will sit back and listen, and big thank you again to our panelists for joining us today.
Thank you, Acting Director Spahn. We appreciate your words. And now it is my pleasure to introduce today's panelists. First, we welcome Dr. Anthony Pender. Dr. Pender is the Vice Provost for Internationalization and Equity at Emerson College, where he provides leadership for internationalization college-wide and for diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives within academic affairs. Under Dr. Pender's leadership, Emerson College won the prestigious 2020 Senator Paul Simon Award for Comprehensive Internationalization, awarded by NAFSA, the leading association worldwide for international educators in higher education. Congratulations. Dr. Pender has also served as Chief International Officer and Assistant Professor at Georgia Gwinnett College, Morehouse College, and Dillard University. And before that, he held positions in the Peace Corps and administrative appointments with the United Negro College Fund and the African American Institute. Tony served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Ecuador from 1987 to 1989. Welcome, Tony. Our next panelist is Dr. Hoang Diep. Dr. Diep is a board-certified psychologist, writer, and international consultant in private practice. Dr. Diep has a doctorate in clinical psychology with an emphasis in international disaster psychology. During the last 25 years, Dr. Diep has leveraged her personal and professional experiences to promote intercultural competence, diversity, equity, and inclusion across numerous grassroots, not-for-profit, and community mental health centers worldwide. She has lived, worked, and traveled to over 40 countries, including serving as a staff psychologist of the Peace Corps. She recently co-authored her first book to amplify marginalized voices and to further destigmatize mental health. Hong served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Peru from 2003 to 2005. Welcome, Hong. Our third panelist is Hermance Matsotsa. Ms. Matsotsa is the founder and CEO of Ubuntu Speaks, a professional development, DEI, and organizational culture and leadership consulting firm. Ms. Matsotsa has spent more than 20 years as a workforce development training specialist, facilitator, global health technical advisor, DEI and belonging, and cross and intercultural communication expert. She has led global health and federal, state, and community development programs with organizations, and I'll beg your pardon, my cursor jumped, and organizations, pardon me, technology. Federal, state, and community development programs with organizations including the Peace Corps, CDC, and World Health Organization. By incorporating the South African philosophy of Ubuntu, human interconnectedness, in her work, she challenges professionals and leaders to create diverse, inclusive, and empowering spaces that encourage a culture of genuine respect, understanding, collaboration, and growth. Hermance served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Togo from 1999 to 2001. She also served as a Crisis Corps volunteer in St. Lucia and a Peace Corps response volunteer in Jamaica. Welcome, Hermance. Thank you all so much for joining us for this Thought Leaders series. I am sure now that our audience is ready to hear from you. So let's start with our first question. We have briefly shared your background in terms of the human doing part of who you are. Because of our topic, we'd like you to start off by telling us about the human being part of yourself, to your comfort level, of course. What dimensions of being you shaped your experience as a Peace Corps volunteer? And feel free to talk about visible and invisible aspects, including culture. Tony, let's start with you.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you, everyone. And also just officially, thank you, Peace Corps and Darlene, for having me a part of this awesome panel. I'm so impressed and in love with my other two panelists. So this is fun for me. I would start by saying I was raised with the understanding that we are everywhere we've ever been. And I think that's important context because in the winter of 1987, when I arrived to Ecuador, I arrived as the only African-American volunteer in that group of about 50 new, fresh trainees from inner city Philadelphia who had recently left a corporate job in the Midwest and who had been trained at the all-Black, all-male Morehouse College in the South by two very active civil rights activist parents. And so I had to find quickly some comfort in that truth because that's everywhere I had been. And so for me, I think it was important as I found myself alone. I think my initial reaction was that I felt alone in this new experience. I had never been to Ecuador before, first of all, but also I had to find some comfort and some strength in that, in my own truth. And that led to being able to, I won't say always successfully, but it led to a very important transformation for me as a volunteer, because visibly I did not look like the other 49 or so volunteers. I did not represent necessarily America for those folks that I encountered, the host country nationals that I encountered. And also I had some quiet sort of expectations of my experience that not everyone, Peace Corps staff or colleagues in terms of trainees, would necessarily understand. And so for me, I think part of the question is, how did all of that shape my volunteer experience? Well, it shaped it tremendously. One, primarily because I came to Ecuador thinking, oh, I'll probably be in some Andean village, you know, and have some sort of experience. But I quickly found out that there was a whole Afro-Ecuadorian community in Ecuador that I was very much attracted to. And I started meeting people on my own based on my own interest in writing and culture and some of the other things. And so immediately upon ending training, when I got my assignment, I was very unhappy with my assignment. My assignment was to a very privileged surfer village in Manta, beautiful part of the country. However, during my training and encountering Black folk in Ecuador, I wanted to know where they were living. I wanted to know what they were about. And I wanted my Peace Corps experience for the subsequent 2 years to be intrinsically aligned with these Black people that looked like me. And I pushed for that. And I don't think Peace Corps Ecuador was prepared for that. And I don't think it was anything in their staff training to be prepared for Tony Pender, the only Black guy who's coming over and has sort of set his sights on a population where he felt he could be of use, and also he felt that he could be at home. And so for me, that was very, very important. It was very transformative, and I applaud Peace Corps because they quickly pivoted. No matter what they had planned for me, we negotiated together what was best for me. And I think I would not have had the leveraging power had I not come to them very comfortably in that winter of '87 with who I was and my background, in order to make the case to have them consider me going to Latola, Ecuador, as Esmeraldas.
Thank you. Thank you, Tony. We appreciate your response. Hong, we would love to hear from you next.
Yeah, thank you so much. Like Tony mentioned, it's just such an honor to be here. And I definitely would be remiss if not to say hola y muy buenas tardes y muchos saludos to my Peace Corps Peru office, because I would not be where I am today without all of your support and love. So to answer your question, I think, yeah, looking back, I don't think I realized how impactful and challenging my being a first-generation Vietnamese American female and child of 2 refugees would be on my experience. My parents are part of the wave of boat people who left Vietnam after the war. My mom was pregnant with me when she escaped, and I was born in a refugee camp in Hong Kong. Upon arrival to the US, we lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with multiple extended family members surviving on food stamps and subsidies. My mom worked in a garment factory and my dad was a laborer who always had 2 jobs. I was the first person in my family to attend college, and they had high expectations for me. When I told them of my desires to join the Peace Corps, they looked at me with disappointment and dismay. My father said, "We risked our lives to bring you to a better place, and this is how you repay us." They told me I couldn't go and that I should focus on my studies. So ultimately, after graduation, I lied to my parents and I told them that I was accepted into graduate school in Peru. I'm not proud of lying to them, but somehow I knew that the experience would positively impact me, and it was a different type of grad school. During service, I was embarrassed to share the secret of other volunteers and staff. I deflected when other PCVs asked me when my parents would visit, and I remember feeling a pang of sadness, though, when other parents visited, beaming with pride as they sat on their child's straw hay bed. Towards the end of my time in Peru, though, I had the opportunity to befriend Tina Cruz Hubbard, another AAPI woman with whom I shared my story. She validated my choices, and the burden of this secret was finally released. I realized then the importance of representation and allyship, and that I try to do that today for my clients and mentees. Like Tony, I also know that my community was slightly disappointed that I wasn't the stereotypical North American. The question I most often heard was, "Where are you from?" which was followed by, "No, but really, where are you really from?" as California was not a good enough answer. I was called and was known as the Chinita, which is literally translated as Chinese person, which added just another layer of burden to my experience. I had to quickly decipher if folks were calling me Chinita in a neutral, derogatory, or endearing way. As a psychologist, I now understand the heavy cognitive and emotional impact of having to constantly question myself and the people's intentions on a daily basis. I was a perpetual foreigner, never quite fully fitting in anywhere.
Thank you, Hong. A very moving story. Hermens, we would love to hear about your human being part of yourself.
Hey, thank you very much. And thank you all who have joined us today and that continue to support Peace Corps volunteers around the world. The human being part of me, this is a wonderful question because that is very much what DEI work seeks to do, find the being part of individuals. But for me, it's multicultural, multilingual, risk-taking, and intersectional, because I was born and raised out of the union and love an adventurous and hardworking American Peace Corps volunteer and a fierce, determined, and ahead of her time Gabonese woman who both willingly chose to defy their respective country cultural, racial, social, and linguistic norms and fall in love. And they were passionate and optimistic about their future and defiant at times. And so therefore, I have embodied all of that. And my being is a collection of my upbringing from my parents' experiences, as well as my own experiences, the people I've met along the way, and all the places that I've been to, which is over 10 countries that I've worked and lived in, it seems like now. And so for me, I am that defiant, but loving individual. And that is I believe is my whole being. And I'm passionate and optimistic about the future and about how the direction that we are going. Although there's all this that's happening, I strongly believe that everyone profoundly is good at heart and has positive intent. And therefore, as you know, my goal, I'm committed to helping others live their best lives and their authentic, healthy lives on their own terms, as long as it doesn't infringe on other people's lives. And also, my parents raised me with the love of travel, volunteerism, and hard work. And so therefore, that is who genuinely I am. I'm that person that is advocating and pushing back on systems that exist and that exist in a way to make people feel as though who they are authentically does not belong. So I'm all about helping people feel like they belong in whatever space they choose to be in. And by my being also means that I see humanity first and beauty and self, not only in myself, but in others. And that I believe that there's a lot of strength in collectiveness as opposed to individualism. And this is all what I learned also during my Peace Corps experience, that if we see each other as humans first, and then we come together regardless of the differences we may have, if we are willing to see each other as individuals who are trying to live our best lives, that we can accomplish many things. So that is my being, that's who I am.
Thank you. That is a wonderful segue into our second question. Expanding on that, how have those identities that you discussed in question one and that experience informed how you bring an intercultural diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective to your work? Let's start by hearing from you, Hong.
Thank you, Darlene. Yeah, as a community health volunteer, I was partnered with Care Peru, which was focusing on a hand washing and nutrition campaign. However, once my community knew that I also had a bachelor's degree in psychology, I was also dubbed the town psychologist. People began sharing their stories about their struggles, their fears, and their hopes for the future as we sat inside their adobe kitchens with guinea pigs running at our feet. I learned how to ask open-ended questions and to listen to stories with an open mind and heart. With that, I began to see how trauma and mental health symptoms just really manifest across different cultures and contexts, which later informed my decision to pursue a career in clinical psychology with emphasis in international disaster. In grad school, I was the only person providing Spanish-speaking services at our student-run clinic, and I later created a rotation for myself at a children's hospital in Ho Chi Minh City, where I could practice my Vietnamese. So my ability to speak multiple languages, quickly establish rapport, and put myself in other people's shoes have greatly served me and my clients. As a perpetual outsider and constantly being othered, I think this also really solidified my desire to look out for folks who oftentimes don't have a seat at the table and to amplify and center marginalized voices, such as within the BIPOC and LGBTQ+ communities. So as an ally, I provide pro bono asylum evaluations for detained Spanish-speaking transgender folks, and I give expert court testimony on gender-affirming care. I also worked with unaccompanied minors at various shelters who left their homes to reunite with their families. And I trained shelter staff on how to best support youth and view their symptoms and behaviors through a trauma-informed lens instead of through pathology and mental illness. For me, I recognize the many privileges I have with these letters after my name. And so I leverage that privilege to lift up others. I deeply resonate with Toni Morrison's quote that says, "When you get these jobs that you have been so brilliantly trained for, just remember that your real job is that if you are free, you need to free somebody else. If you have some power, then your job is to empower somebody else." So it's been a complicated journey for me because culturally I was trained to be humble and not to brag about my achievements. However, with the increase in AAP I hate, I have had to examine my own internalized racism and the model minority myth. In my DEI training and consultations, I also openly share about my anti-racism journey of honing and refining what it means to be an ally to me. I'm vulnerable in that I may have made mistakes in the past, but I show up to learn and do better. Looking back, I think I've been intersectional in my DEI work before even understanding the concept of intersectionality. I believe that we are the sum of our life experiences and the structures and systems through which we navigate, sometimes some easier than others. Whether in my clinical work, writing, consultation, or trainings, I give folks the space to be seen and heard. Everyone has a story that needs to be shared because shame hides in darkness and secrecy.
Thank you, Hong. Thank you. Hermance, would you like to address this question?
Yes, definitely. My identity and how I choose to define myself, despite of who others may see me as or want to define me, is first, I'm African, period, American, Black, woman, and a professional. And in that title in itself, there's so much more: mother, wife, daughter, friend. But for me, that how I choose to define myself in this way means that I see humanity first in others. And I've stated that before because it's so important to me. And effectively, this means that I respect others for their being, who authentically who they are and how they choose to present themselves to me, as opposed to how others have either informed me of who they are or believe they should be. This is strong. This idea of seeing people for who they are helps me out a lot in the work that I do. And as a DEI and belonging facilitator, coach, and strategist, I understand the importance of meeting people where they are in their mindset at that time, while encouraging them at the same time to challenge their own teachings, experiences, beliefs, and societal and cultural norms, and as well as their heart that may say differently, that may say that they should or feel comfortable with infringing on other people's rights, and keep them from embracing and connecting with others in an authentic, positive, and heart-to-heart humanist type of way. What in your life experiences, education, daily practices, and interactions with others have brought you to this particular conclusion? That is the one key question that I ask a lot of times during my coaching sessions, because I feel like it helps individuals to sit back and really examine the collectiveness of who they are, who they're being, their own being. And with diversity, inclusion, and belonging, it's all about why, when, how, and to whom you ask the question, while staying neutral and unbiased, and not appearing shocked or surprised or disappointed with whatever answer you're given. And one of the things I've learned as Imanitu, as opposed to Yovo, or the Black Yovo that I was often called during my Peace Corps service in Togo. But Imanitu is the person who believes in the people. And that was a name that I was given by my community members in Togo. And that's who I am. And that's who I choose to continue being. And that's what I bring into the work that I do.
Thank you. Thank you, Hermance. And Tony, to repeat the question, please expand on how your identity and experience informs how you bring ICDEI into your work.
Now, that's a good question. I joined actually my panelists in leaning on really the soft skill development from my time as a volunteer. So I made this very dramatic case for wanting to go to the northern province of Esmeraldas and work with all these Black folk. Sometimes you better be ready for what you pray for, because you might get it. And I had no idea what that would mean. And so one of the biggest skill developments from that time of working with these Black fishermen was moving at a pace of trust. I don't even think I even understood what I just said then, but I think so much about it as I do this work now, this DEI work and internationalization work, that trust is your superpower. Empathy is your superpower. And no matter what the issue is, what gap you're trying to fill, what problem you're trying to solve, when people trust you and believe you, it's amazing what you do together as a group. And that was the very first time I was confronted with that, because I thought the easiest part of my service, once I made this case to go live with this group, was that because I was Black and they was Black, it was just going to be a love fest, when that was in fact not the case. Because when I arrived, I was arriving as a representative of the United States Peace Corps. And here was a group of people in the province of Esmeraldas that had never been shown by their own country people much love, had never really been lifted up nationally as a thriving part of the community, national community. And here I was coming with merely just a big heart that had no strategic plan. This heart had no type of strategies and next steps, and my Spanish was trash. You know, I mean, so I came with this huge heart with no other real solid skills other than a feeling of belonging, as Hermance talks about. I felt it, I sensed it. It wasn't confirmed, but I sensed it. And from that, I think through Spanish that was not so good, that became very, very good. I think my happiness conquered my Spanish, my joy, created friendships that were probably much more accelerated than they would have been had I been in a town that I didn't want to be in, or in a situation that I couldn't feel. But we did some amazing things as a community. Well, they did. Because I think also in hindsight, I realized I learned more from the community in my time there in Latola than they ever got from me in that short period of time. But you know, things like empathy and trust and understanding really the core definition of what intercultural competence was, right? And it was not just one-sided. That I think back to at the top of the hour when I was saying, I came there relatively confident because of my background and my upbringing. So I had things to share that they could learn from me as well. So for me, it's the soft skill development was everything. And I bring that to my work even today.
Thank you, Tony. I have about 100 comments, responses, questions that I would love to engage each of you in, but I am attending to the clock. I do need to know that I will be calling each of you. Many of us recall the slogan, Peace Corps is the toughest job you will ever love. I think the same can be said about DEI work. You each intimate that already. Did your service help you develop any strategies, specific strategies that you use when things get particularly difficult in your current work, advancing D, E, and I? Hermance?
Yes, oh, it definitely has. One thing Peace Corps will teach you is who you are, who you want to be, where you're going to go, and also just in essence for me, just gave me so many life lessons. And definitely one of those life lessons was about being patient with the progress, even though you want to just, you want it to happen fast, 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 but just to be patient and to really meet people where they're at in their life and to listen. Oh my. And to learn how to lean out and listen and let others lean in and tell you and to educate you and to school you on what the reality is on the ground and what's happening, as opposed to you always, you know, giving your 2 cents, as my dad would say. You always like to give your 2 cents about everything. And so, yes, it really has helped me gain strategies in the work that I currently do and that I've always done in so many different levels. But on a personal level, it has allowed me to see and understand and appreciate humanity in people, regardless if they see the connection with me or not, or regardless if I see the connection with them. And just the collection of my experiences and the work that I've done and Peace Corps, it's allowed me to really understand the Ubuntu philosophy. This is a philosophy that I know I was, my mom and dad never really put a name to it. However, later on, I realized that what they were teaching me and how they were raising me was this South African philosophy of Ubuntu, which talks about human interconnectedness. And it simply means that, you show humanity towards others. And this is a belief that means that there's a universal bond that is shared between all of us. And once we recognize that, then we can easily see the humanity in others, believe that I am who I am because we all are, that humanity is caught up and intrinsically, bound up in each other and what we do and in our experiences. And more importantly, respect others, be helpful to other people, show kindness and trust others and have positive intent. And so all of those things that I learned that helped me really understand this philosophy has allowed me to live that personally. Now, in the work that I do and how I really share that philosophy with other people and corporations or organizations that I work with, is that by showing them that they can effectively embrace diversity and inclusion without it being a threat to them and their organization and who they stand for. And also the work that I do means teaching leaders how to create a safe space for their employees so that they can come and show up and do what they do authentically with feeling as though they belong and have respect. And then also I work with organizations to help them draft policies and standards and create public statements that seek to really show that the importance of diversity, inclusion, and belonging, and also that not only is a check the box kind of thing, but something that's that will stay with them, that is that becomes part of not only their mission, but their value and who they are. So that's the work that I do on a corporate side, and all of that is bringing in Ubuntu with it.
Thank you, Hermance. Thank you. Tony, how about you?
Wow. I think all of these different soft skills that we talk about, I think for me, the Peace Corps, without a doubt, I would say without a doubt, hands down, that background with Peace Corps has really enabled me to facilitate, I would say not just facilitate, but facilitate with intentionality, creating climates of belonging for diverse students on the various campuses where I've worked, and create greater awareness on how their intersectional identities impact their experiences on our campuses. I think that's the most important thing. Had I not had Peace Corps experience and navigated that and figured that out, I think through osmosis, I do it naturally. And as a leader in higher ed. And then second, I think I'm always trying to remind myself of the emotional labor that's involved with DEI work. We haven't talked a lot about it here, but I know Wang and Hermance and I have talked about it offline a little bit. It's exhausting being both the subject and the object of DEI subject, you know, and then when you're the leader of it, you know, and so here you are trying to facilitate change that impacts you as well, because you are too a part of that BIPOC community in that space or in that institution or in that environment. And so I think as I get fatigued as the leader of it, I have to remember all the other many more important foot soldiers that are part of creating this climate of belonging for all of us, and check in with them. I mean, because it's so many much more brighter, more talented people below me that do different things. And I see, you know, my job is really to be a cheerleader and lift people up, and check on people. Are they well? You know, because it's really exhausting. It's really exhausting. As important as it is, it can be really exhausting. And so for those things, I approach my job with intentionality. I'm rooted since the 80s in doing this, all the way from Latoya Esmeralda's to now, but also that I'm very cognizant of how grueling this work can be, because there is no real end in sight, right? And that's when the fatigue just gets over and over again. Usually when you can see the light, fatigue feels a little bit better because you know it's almost over. This is a pandemic since 1619, I tell my students, and we can't see the light. And so checking in with my soldiers that are in this game of DEI work and space, and some have not officially signed on to it at all. They just know they are uncomfortable, and they just know that the environment is inhospitable. And so they're engaged in it, whether they want to be or not. So for me, that's it. Just being mindful of the emotional labor and how that is distributed, and how we mine resources in this regard.
Thank you, Tony. This conversation is indeed a drink of water at the well. Thank you. Hong, your response.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think I echo what Hermance and Tony have said, that this is a lifelong journey, right? That DEI doesn't stop when you get a certificate of completion or anything like that. And so I think my motto for myself has always been to seek first to understand and then to be understood. And so I think for me, what I remember most about Peace Corps and my time there was that my focus was on this hand washing campaign. And I remember when I was first assigned that, I was naive enough to think, will I really spend 2 years talking about hand washing? And the answer was yes, because behavioral change is hard. And that I quickly realized that my community members were more able to implement change if it came from like a more personal approach. And I saw the importance of encouraging my community members' independence in their decision-making, clarifying their strengths, listening to their concerns, and eventually collaborating on a plan for change. And later on in grad school, I had come to learn that's called motivational interviewing. So I guess I was doing that before I even realized what that was. And then I also remember the wise words from my Peace Corps counterpart, Amelia. I had worked really hard on a presentation, and I was super discouraged that not many seemed interested in the workshop or they left early. And that day she pulled me aside and she taught me the rule of thirds. She told me that next time you do a talk or presentation, imagine the room divided into 3 groups. One group of people are really going to like you and the topic. One group will probably not like you or the topic and probably wishes they were somewhere else. And then there is a remaining neutral third. Which group do you want to focus your energy on? And which groups could you have the most impact with? And so that's definitely something I try to bring to the table whenever I do a presentation, which helps to shift my focus and perspective. And I think lastly, if you're going to engage in this DEI work, I think of really learning to redefine what success means and constantly defining it. During our pre-service training, we were constantly, reminded the importance of integrating ourselves into our communities if we wanted to be a successful volunteer. I arrived to Mato during the rainy season, and so the first few months were difficult, to say the least. I remember having an especially bad day and just wanted to escape to the nearest town to check my email and get some ice cream. I ran to the car stop and I noticed a parked car pulling away at the same time. I was wondering where I was going to sit. Because you see, when I first arrived, the drivers would oftentimes let me sit in the front seat by myself, even though I took up 2 paid seats, because in Peru, the middle console is also considered a seat. I resisted, but they insisted because I was the guest. But that day, Javier got out of the car. He opened the trunk to the station wagon and he motioned me inside. The trunk was packed full, I think with a lamb, some chicken, various sacks of potatoes and other cargo. And I climbed in and I smiled because I knew in that moment that this was what being a successful volunteer looked like. Javier no longer saw me as a guest, but he just saw me as another community member. So I channel this moment when I look for the small wins in DEI work and how it may not always look exactly like one plans, but might even be more meaningful. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to each of you. Your experiences indeed reach out to me, as I am sure to our entire audience this afternoon. Thank you so much, Anthony, Hong, and Hermence, for sharing with us how your Peace Corps experience influenced you and how you have incorporated your service into who you are and what you do in order to facilitate equitable communities, trust, belonging for all people. I never get tired of hearing how returned Peace Corps volunteers continue to use their Peace Corps experience to make the world a better place, long after returning home. As some of you have mentioned, many returned Peace Corps volunteers will tell you that their Peace Corps service taught them how to really listen, hear what others are trying to say, to see people. As our panelists' stories show, listening is critical to advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion. To our audience, the stories, the insights, and observations that our panelists have shared here today have been motivational and inspirational. Peace Corps has been engaged in a moment of institutional self-reflection as well, related to this theme of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So at this time, we would like to share with you a brief update on what the Peace Corps has been doing to advance ICDEI within our own systems. To do that, it is my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Jackie Deneen, Deputy Chief of Staff of the Peace Corps, to tell us about the Peace Corps' recent work in this area.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Darlene, our fabulous RPCV panelists, and to the Third Gold team for holding these wonderful forums and providing space today for a readout to this audience on the exciting things that Peace Corps is doing in the realm of ICDE&I. Part of our approach and intention at Peace Corps is that we have been weaving ICDE&I into all that we do. Intention is to integrate at every level, volunteers, staff, and communities. Because we are global, it is critical to purposefully integrate intercultural competence, the IC, with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Otherwise, we are doing a disservice to our mission in not addressing this complexity. We have been steadily approaching ICDE&I with a long-term lens of systemic integration. We have been quietly but intentionally focusing on building this at a field level. First, by defining competencies, or what knowledge, skills, attitudes, and behaviors are expected and needed, not in just the intercultural competence realm, but in regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Since 2015, we've been conducting 40-hour, 5-day workshops for all post staff, including power, privilege, intersectionality, systemic inequities, including those related to race, gender, sexual orientation, ability, designed and customized to the country context in conjunction with local staff. We are also ensuring that we unify this approach across Peace Corps and with headquarters and domestic operations, in addition to field efforts. It is so important for us to use this occasion of hearing from 3 RPCVs who weave ICDE&I into the work that they do, and that we are able to share with you how we are weaving 4 specific ICDE&I threads to support an accountability structure and our 2022 through 2026 agency strategic plan. Thread 1, the DE&I task force, was formed to analyze letters sent to the agency during the racial unrest and protests last summer. These letters highlight the experiences and perceptions of the writers, RPCVs, and staff and other constituents, resulting in over 600 recommendations, many repeated again and again. Short-term and long-term recommendations have been drafted and presented to leadership. Thread 2, the barrier analysis, focused on gathering agency data to identify the root causes of disparities through equal employment opportunities so that Peace Corps can take action to remedy these policies, procedures, and practices that lead to such disparities. Thread 3, President Biden has signed 3 executive orders and 2 memorandums focused on DE&I implementation. We're right now in the process of implementing these directives. The EO on advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government is really the umbrella EO. Under this EO, we are highlighting the work Peace Corps is doing on preventing and combating discrimination on the basis of gender identity and sexual orientation, coordinating with the White House Gender Policy Council. We put forward a plan, engagement plan through tribal consultation and strengthening nation-to-nation relationships, and advancing human rights of the LGBTQI+ persons around the world. Thread 4, finally, our ongoing internal ICD&I work. All of these components are building upon an established culture of equity and inclusion. Through the Equity Executive Order, an Agency Equity Council was established, an accountability body made up of senior leadership and representatives of the employee resource groups. Representatives focus on recruitment, data evaluation, behavioral health, safety and security training, but also expands into finance and even procurement. This goes beyond staff and truly looks at how we incorporate equity in our everyday work across the agency. And finally, we're incorporating all these equity threads into our strategic plan, our roadmap for what the agency prioritizes over the next 4 to 5 years. There have been 15 task force members who've worked on reviewing the recommendation letters, month after month, committed to honoring the service and experience of the writers and determined to move this agency beyond words and into action. A few key points. Reviewing over 600 recommendations, this team was divided into groups focused on 3 stakeholder areas: staff, volunteer pre-service, and volunteer service and RPCVs. 27 thematic buckets emerged in this review, and these buckets made up of action priority areas under which 100 recommendations have been sorted for presentation to the leadership. Time does not permit me to review all of the 100+ recommendations. I can, however, give you a flavor of what's in the report. A few recommendations that are actively in process of being addressed. And as you can see here, from increasing diversity represented in leadership to strengthening mental health services for PCVs, particularly managing race-based stress, to strategies to mitigate barriers to service related to legal and medical clearance. We are looking forward to promoting our ICD&I work internally and externally, and it is important to us to highlight the following areas to you. Strengthen existing ICD&I foundations, implement new ICD&I actions, catalyze systemic change, and demonstrate the accountability and transparency of our work. Here, you can see our progress to date, from 80% of posts getting the 5-day ICD&I training, implementing ICD&I metrics and increasing ICD&I engagement, to expanding our Chief Diversity Officer team and adding a Chief Diversity Officer as a voting member on the Senior Policy Committee. Next, for the next 6 months, an outlook. First, the second phase of the barrier analysis launched in April, anticipating phase 3 of the action planning going to be happening in June, and phase 4, the evaluation and assessment in August. Second, first time the agency strategic plan process has included dozens of hours of listening sessions that include domestic and post staff. Third, this week's launch of Inside Peace Corps Communication Initiative. Guys, this is big. And so it's information updates to the RPCV community, so please stay tuned. Fourth, staff unconscious bias training will be completed for all Peace Corps staff by the end of May, beginning of June. And fifth, volunteer unconscious bias training will be launched to support volunteers when they prepare to return to service. Next, fiscal year and beyond, we are working to integrate equity and inclusion into our agency strategic plan objectives and measurements. We will continue delivering on task force recommendations and will submit our agency equity plan to the White House. Talk about accountability. And more intentionality, balancing capacity building to systems level equity and inclusion integrations at post. And much, much more to come. We hope this agency ICD&I update has been informative and has inspired you to be ICD&I change agents in your communities today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jackie. Accountability is right. This is an exciting report, and the entire agency is involved. This is all of an agency effort. Thank you for sharing with our audience the work that the Peace Corps is undertaking to advance intercultural competency, diversity, equity, and inclusion within the Peace Corps. Today, we've heard about where the Peace Corps is right now. And as our panelist, Dr. Depp reminded us, advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion is a lifelong process. As Peace Corps continues this process, we will remember Dr. Depp's advice. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Finally, as we wrap up today, I want to reiterate a special thank you to Jackie Deneen, all of our inspiring panelists, Dr. Pender, Dr. Depp, Ms. Metsutsa, Acting Director Spahn, the ambassadors and representatives from the embassies of Ecuador, Peru, and Togo, bravo, and the National Peace Corps Association and the Friends of Groups. And I certainly want to thank all RPCVs attending this afternoon for your service and for continuing to be that spark for positive change and inspiration. At our last Thought Leader series on philanthropy and corporate social responsibility, I beg your pardon, we opened with a greeting from the second gentleman of the United States of America, Mr. Douglas Emhoff. He said something that bears repeating, and I quote, "The lifelong commitment that returned Peace Corps volunteers have to serve in your communities is an inspiration to all of us. You are a reminder that we can all be stewards of positive change in our workplace and communities." This especially applies to what we can collectively do in our communities. We are now going to open the chat function on Zoom, and for those that are able to stay on a little longer, we encourage attendees to share their appreciation for the panelists here today and any comments for the Peace Corps as we celebrate our 60th anniversary.